Ambassador, welcome to you. Thank you for joining us on this.
Thank you for having me.
Let's first talk about the tunnels. How was Israel not aware of the extent, the breadth? I knew that you knew they were there, but the massiveness of these tunnels and what they could hold and where they went, only 10 minutes from the border. How did you not know?
We did know. Maybe we didn't have all the details, but we did know, and we've been going in and we've been finding all this stuff and showing it to the world. And the most important thing, I think, to understand is, for years, Hamas was stealing from the people of Gaza, you know, the cement and the concrete and the iron that went into building these tunnels was supposed to be for the people of Gaza, to build housing, to build roads and so forth. And they stole this and other aid over years to investing millions that should have gone to the people of Gaza into their underground terror network. And that network we are now destroying.
Ambassador, did Hamas use these tunnels during the attack on October 7th?
It's not clear they used this specific tunnel, which is interesting. The truth is, on October 7th, they attacked us on land. They crossed over the border fences and stormed into Israel. And of course, as you know, and has been widely reported, they murdered, they raped, they beheaded, they burnt people alive, they machine gunned the young people at the music festival. Terrible, terrible things. And we can never allow them to do that again. And that's the goal of our operation. It's to destroy Hamas's capabilities to commit that sort of terror attack and to end their rule over the Gaza Strip. In future, when aid is given to the people of Gaza in the future, that aid has to reach the people of Gaza and not be stolen by Hamas to build a nefarious military machine.
We're going to get into that in just a moment, Ambassador. I'm wondering when you're going to launch an investigation into the security breakdown as to what led to October 7th, allowing the Hamas militants and terrorists over the border into Israel.
I think the minute the war is over, there'll be an investigation. In the past, when we've had such security lapses or crises in the past, we've had investigations. Most famously, 50 years ago, after the 1973 war, when Prime Minister Golda Meir was surprised by the Arab onslaught. We were attacked at the time from the north by Syria, from the south by Egypt, in a coordinated attack that our intelligence didn't pick up. At the end of the war, we had a National Commission of Inquiry headed by a Chief Justice and former Chiefs of Staff of the Israeli military, and they called witnesses from the Prime Minister down. And of course, something similar will happen now, and lessons have to be learned, and everyone, from Prime Minister Netanyahu down, everyone of responsibility, we'll want to know what did they know, when did they know it, and on what information did they act or did they not act?
Many Israelis are finding the Prime Minister responsible for not bringing their family members home, those that are still being held hostage. They stopped a speech that the Prime Minister was issuing or was giving just a couple of days ago. How receptive is he to the family members of the hostages that are still being held in Gaza and the efforts to get them home?
Very much so. He's been meeting with the families of hostages and offering them support. You can only imagine what hell these people are going through. I mean, they've got loved ones who've been kidnapped now for more of 80 days in the Gaza Strip. They know what violence Hamas is capable of. We saw it on October 7th. We heard it from the first group of hostages who were released in November, the physical and psychological abuse that they suffered. So, of course, the families deserve our support. And we believe our strategy of applying military pressure on Hamas is the way to achieve the freedom of our hostages. Ultimately, Hamas isn't going to release people because they suddenly become humanitarians. On the contrary, we understand that they are brutal terrorists. But they will, as President Biden said, they will respond to pressure, and the Israeli Defense Forces are applying that pressure as we speak on Hamas's military machine.
Bibi Netanyahu has essentially said many times he's going to go to the very end. You're going to fight to the very end until Hamas is eradicated. I imagine you mean the group. How, in fact, do you plan to address the ideology of Hamas?
I mean, we have to create an alternative that people can believe in a future, a better future without Hamas. But it's most important to remember, if I can use an example from the Second World War, yes? The Nazi regime in Germany was destroyed. It doesn't mean there aren't Nazis. There are still Nazis in Germany today, but they just don't control the government or the army or the police. So that's the goal. Maybe you can't control what people think, but by removing Hamas from power, it won't have the capabilities to hurt other people with its crazy extremist ideology.
I want to read for you a quote from Thomas Friedman, the New York Times, talking about what needs to happen next in this war. And I want you to weigh in on it, Ambassador, if you can. He says the best way to discredit and destroy Sinwar, which you well know is the leader of Hamas, is for Israel to leave Gaza and make him come out of his tunnel, face his people and the world, and own Gaza's rebuilding on his own. Is this something, the Prime Minister, that your government is open to?
I'm afraid it's not that simple, because Hamas rules Gaza with an iron fist, and they're not going to allow the people there to vote in free elections. They're not going to allow a free expression of opinion. But I believe that once Hamas has been destroyed, and we will destroy it, I think you'll see the pent-up anger by the people of Gaza, who are angry with Hamas for starting this terrible war, for bringing about this crisis, for bringing about all the destruction and the tragedy in Gaza. They understand that it was Hamas that started this war. They understand that it was Hamas, by refusing to release more hostages, ended the ceasefire that was in until the end of November, the beginning of December. People of Gaza are not stupid. They know who is responsible for the violence that we're seeing.
What about the civilian casualties, Ambassador? We're looking at 20,000 plus Palestinians that have been killed on the ground in Gaza, many of them women and children. The AP reporting there was a strike in Israel declaring a safe zone. One woman was killed and at least 8 were wounded in response. Israel's military saying it would not refrain from operating in safe zones, quote, if it identifies terrorist organization activity threatening the security of Israel. Are there any safe zones, Ambassador, in Gaza? You tell people to go south, they are struck in the south. You identify safe zones, they are struck in the safe zones. Where do Palestinians go?
Yasmin, we've asked people to go to the safe zones where we don't expect there to be, heavy close quarter fighting, like we've seen in places like Sajia, like we've seen in places like Gaza City. But if Hamas is there, we will be very, very surgical. But the safer zones are definitely safer than staying in combat zones. And we urge people to go there. They are safer, definitely so. But if you ask me the larger question about civilian casualties, we don't want to see a single civilian casualty, not one. We're making a maximum effort to keep civilians.
But you've seen 20,000, Ambassador, at this point, 20,000 plus civilian casualties in Gaza. I'm sure you've seen the images that the world has seen, these children that are dying in the arms of their parents in Gaza. At what point is it enough?
Yasmin, if you don't mind, I'll politely correct you. Hamas says 20,000 people have been killed, and they want you to believe they're all civilians, right? First of all, we presume that their number is exaggerated. And secondly, obviously, they're not all civilians, because you have to presume that Israel hasn't hit a single Hamas terrorist, which is, of course, ridiculous. Hamas makes no distinction. They put out these numbers, and it's as if, once again, they're all civilians. It's not true. We believe we've hit thousands, many thousands of Palestinian terrorists we've killed in this operation. That's our goal. And if Hamas says, well, 200 people died in the weekend, so they don't give you the background. If all 200 were terrorists for Hamas, that's good. They're our enemy. We want to get them. We obviously don't want to see civilians, and we're making a maximum effort. That's why we're asking civilians, please leave the zones where we know there's going to be heavy, close order fighting between us and the terrorists. Move to the safer zones. They are safer. They are there, and we're helping people evacuate where we can.
I'm sure, Ambassador, what you're saying is true, but you certainly don't argue that children are also losing their lives in Gaza right now, right?
100%. And it's very, very sad, and it's tragic. And we don't want to see, as I say, any civilian, especially not children, being caught up in the crossfire.
Ambassador.
But, Yasmin, it's important to understand that Hamas is deliberately sacrificing Gaza's children. Their strategy of using human shields, it's not just Israel says so. The United States says so, the UK, the European Union have all said Hamas has adopted a deliberate strategy of using Gazan civilians and Gaza's children as a shield for its war machine. That's why they built their military structure under urban neighborhoods, under schools, under mosques, under UN facilities, under hospitals. This is Hamas's whole strategy. Every time a civilian is killed inadvertently for us, it's a tragedy, but that's Hamas's strategy. They want to see civilian deaths. They want to see every last Gazan die on the altar of their crazy extremist agenda.
The JobNet.
you.